whole scheme of history, this isn't even a blip. It's just been very short, but it's been fast-paced. And I think the most important thing for me about the history of libraries and web conferencing is that the technologies have been improving and becoming more accessible. And that's important to us because that trend seems to be continuing, and that's good news for us because there are more things available for libraries of all sizes. For example, in the early days, which was actually just a few years ago, we did what we called Chat CE. And about the only thing we really had available in Iowa in terms of bandwidth and what we could handle was using instant messaging and text chat. Iowa has 543 public libraries, and 80% of them are in communities of population under 2,500. I have libraries with a population of 250. I'm sure Cindy has a similar experience. So, and they are geographically distant from each other. So as Cindy mentioned, ours are also can be remote. So they had limited resources in staff and time. If you're a one-person library and you're shoveling the sidewalks and cleaning the toilets and doing all of that stuff, if you want just an hour or two for a workshop, it's just not practical for you to drive a couple of hours in order to do that. So we wanted to give them a chance to have some learning at least without having to leave their own libraries. So we did some like mini workshops and roundtables where they just used text chat. It was kind of a challenge to manage that, but we were able to connect them synchronously using that. They're limited functionality, but it was interesting. It was a start, and we had some success with that. Then tools like NetMeeting became more available, but bandwidth was still an issue, and some hardware and technology issues in the local library were still a problem. But the Gates Foundation came in, so our bandwidth improved and technologies improved. Libraries had more computers, and more importantly, they began to use them more and become more comfortable with them. And then tools such as WebEx and GoToMeeting were being used for meetings and classes and conferencing. In Iowa, the state libraries and the library service areas had access to an online classroom environment, Horizon WIMBA, through their community partnership with Web Junction. So we started teaching classes, and we were seeing some of that elsewhere around the country. But at the same time, we were also seeing other tools that were appearing on the web that we didn't have to pay for. So we were able to explore them, introduce them to libraries, and start having them use them for their own local web conferencing. Now, I have to say, if you ask some libraries in Iowa, particularly in my area, we might say that we use them as guinea pigs for these things, but they always seem to game for it. And bless their hearts, they're willing to try anything. They just say, "What do you want us to do now, Karen?" And they give it a shot. Yeah, they're great. So not only were new tools appearing, but the existing tools were beginning to add functionality. So instant messaging wasn't just about text chat anymore. It was also audio and video conferencing. And then still more tools became available on the web. Again, there were pro versions where you had to pay a fair amount of money for a pretty sophisticated environment. But also there was a new crop of free tools that actually are pretty sophisticated for free, things like DimDim and Scribbling. So libraries began to use some of them, and it was more accessible to libraries of all sizes. Cloud computing became more common, so libraries didn't have to worry about storage space or things getting lost or being able to access from just one computer in their library. We have a lot more options now for web conferencing, both as consumers, so if we're attending webinars or conferences, but also as producers. And there's still some pretty decent options that don't require a huge amount of bandwidth for those areas where that's really not as good as we would like it to be yet. And I'll keep coming back to this, but a key thing for me about this greater availability of tools is that more libraries are beginning to use them for their meetings and their collaborations and classes and conferences. So web conferencing becomes more efficient as we are accustomed to it and getting more comfortable with the tools, more things are available. It's very easy for us to just say, "Oh, I'll meet you online," and it's not a big